IVM.
Hello one, hello all. Welcome to the Diary of the Traveling Professor. And I'm Siddharth Deshmukh talking to you on this Thursday. And I must say that this week has been much better than last week as far as London is concerned. Sure, the lockdown is on, and sure, the NHS is still having its hands full. But I do see a little bit of sun, and I do see that the sunset is now at almost 4:30 rather than the terrible 3:55 that was there last month. Well, we have to look at small positives every single time, every single day, and we have to, take comfort from that. In fact, one of the things that I was going to do was going to talk about how we have to actually look at small comforts in life, or small things in life, or small wins in life, and how do we make it practical in today's diary entry. This was inspired by a student or a learner of mine. His name is Ameya Atre, right? Ameya, shout out to you for asking this question. Basically, at a broad level, his question was, how do you develop a marketing strategy for something big that you're planning? It could be an e-commerce marketplace platform like Amazon with an extremely less budget. Okay. So if you're working for a startup, or if you have a startup yourself and you're looking at marketing, wanting to go about that way, how do you take on a place which is clearly in the space of a large giant, and how do you actually do that with extremely less budget? Wow, that's a toughie, isn't it? That's a toughie. There's no easy answer for this, Ameya, and anybody else listening to, and hoping for a Kailash Jeevan, a Ramban sort of situation wherein you get an answer so easy and it's easy to use and stuff like that. There's no magic formula. In fact, Ben Horowitz says that the hard thing about hard things is that there is no formula, and that is so true about a startup. But having said that, these are a few things that you could keep in mind. Okay. The first thing you could keep in mind is to look at your minimum viable audience. So instead of saying, hey, I'm going to take on the might of, in this case, Amazon or any other large thing, and look at the total market size, this is where you are going to get frightened and you are going to try and spread your budget thin. When you try and spread your budget thin to get to each and every customer who is currently going to a large behemoth, you're going to face the problem of inertia, and you're going to face the problem of not being, creating enough noise for yourself and enough demand for yourself based upon the meager budget that you have. So look at what Seth Godin says, the minimum viable audience, right? I've made a separate podcast for this, but the minimum viable audience is something that you require in order for you to stay afloat in business for the next year. Now, suddenly your battle becomes different, because then you're defining your target audience on your own terms. Okay. So while it's great to have growth ambitions and stuff like that, first you have to survive before you start succeeding. So that's my first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is, don't talk to your customers as if they are one and the same person, right? What I would like you perhaps to consider is to understand that not everybody in your target audience is actually the same, and there are early adopters and innovators even within your minimum viable audience whom you will be able to reach out to much better, because they are looking for new products and looking for new experiences in a way that will either benefit them from a tech perspective or from an emotional or even a transactional perspective, from a business perspective, right? So there will be people who will embrace your product, okay, or your service or a platform, whatever it is, in a much better way than the rest of the audience. Find these people. Know where they are, know which communities they inhabit, understand what causes and movements are important for them, and make your communication to them based out of what their identity is rather than what your product is. Connect to a cause or a movement that already exists. If not, create one of your own and talk to the early adopters and innovators and influencers amongst these about your product, because that will help you way better than a normally driven digital campaign or non-digital campaign, right? So that's my advice number 2. Advice number 3 is, don't develop your product completely and then do the marketing, because that linear approach will not work. Okay. In fact, start your marketing first and then co-create your product along with your early customers. This kind of methodology is talked about by Steve Blank and, in the customer development methodology. And I found it very, very useful. In fact, Facebook started off as a college directory. If you see an early interview of Mark Zuckerberg, you will see that he had started off as a college directory and suddenly it became what it became over a series of pivots, and marketing was done way before the product actually developed itself. Perhaps we can take a lesson from that. So here are 3 ways in which you can have a strategic approach with your extremely meager budget towards creating something splendid. I hope that helped you, Ameya, and I hope that helps any person who is actually starting a startup, because actually a startup is nothing but an experiment rather than a full-fledged company. And we need to realize that there are different rules for a startup than what there are in a normal company. So it works at a product level, it works at a marketing level, and also at a business model level. We need to understand that marketing for a startup requires the entire company to be galvanized towards very, very specific victories that will ensure your survival over the next year or so. Then pick your next new battles. Well, I hope you like this diary entry of mine. Many more to come from where this came from. I also do a series called The Traveling Professor Investigates, a video series which I put up on Instagram and on LinkedIn. I've done anime and cancel culture so far. One more soon to come up on the next Saturday. This podcast I do on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and this will also evolve to a better, newer avatar soon. Watch out for this space. And you can always follow me on LinkedIn and Instagram. I'm the Traveling Professor, right? I do make some notes along with this podcast entries, right? These podcast entries, which could be worth reading. And if you like podcasts like these, just check out all that IVM's offering to you. On that happy note then, have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the weekend.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'd like to thank the sponsors on the network this week, Storytel and The Whole Truth Foods. Thank you for supporting us. So a great bunch of episodes this week. First, let me tell you about The Note with Maruk Inayat. It was featuring Asaduddin Owaisi. She spoke to the AIMIM leader to understand what the Indian Muslim voter wants and how his party is any different from the BJP. On Advertising is Dead, Varun spoke with Malika Sadani. Malika is the founder and CEO of the Moms Company. They discussed the science of motherhood. On Naan Curry with Sadaf and Archit, Dhananjay Chuck of the Edges and Sledges podcast showed up, so we did another crossover, this time with food and cricket. On Agla Station Adulthood, Ritasha and Ayushi talked to Gaurang Sangvi, head of digital business at DSP Mutual Fund. The episode has some logical and realistic advice, especially for millennials, on how to invest their money. Shunya One is back this week with Sheila Ditya and myself. We spoke to Anirudh Singla of Pepper Content this week. Really interesting conversation. Anirudh gave us some real deep insights into content creation and how they're thinking about different ways of creating it. Do check them out. Really fun show, really fun conversation. And with that, we hope to see you again next week.
पेश खिदमत है आपकी शान में हमारे अंजुमन से. Hi, I am Sadaf.
And I'm Archit. खाने का इतिहास, economics, policy, psychology, सब है मेन्यू पे.
Only on the Naan Curry podcast every Wednesday, सिर्फ IVM podcast ऐप या वेबसाइट पर या फिर जहां से भी आप अपने पॉडकास्ट सुनते हो.